L.W.D. Laurence, The Master Key. Chapter 9, Lesson 8, Unconscious Concentration. If you would make concentration and mental discipline not only a success, but a positive pleasure, and then carry it into every act of your life. This explains what was said above about it's being necessary to make thousands of attempts to master the art. If scientific concentration is put into every act of the day, then one would concentrate 1,000 times in 6 weeks or less. If one could practice it perfectly in a year, it would be an immense gain. This is what might be termed unconscious concentration. Willpower can be used now, but not in the way so many advocate, in the helping of the mind on all subjects on which it is necessary. It will have been noticed that the words "the Master Key" figure in the title of this work, and no student will have had any difficulty in connecting the title with the mastery of self and things outside of self, such as circumstances. Thus it is with the human will, in common with the other faculties of the mind. It must share in the work of raising and transmuting the lower nature by a study of will culture and mental discipline. At this juncture, unless previously dealt with in the early part of the studies, the student will be wise in deciding what he is going in for, what his aim is, what he intends to do with his possibilities, what faculties in particular desires to train or evolve, and use the will to stir and prompt him to action, to keep him up to the mark. It will supplement his enthusiasm. It will steady too much zeal, too much one-sidedness, help him to keep a mental and moral balance, as the reins in the hands of a skillful horseman prevent the animal from stumbling. There's no light thing coming to a decision with regards to one's ideals. Not at all. It takes time to grow to the point where one's future becomes an ideal, which is something ahead of the average mind. An ideal is too frequently associated in the mind with something visionary, something all very well for the dreamer, the poet, but of no use to the practical, hard-headed businessman or the intelligent woman or even average individual. Therefore, with too many people, we get no ideals, unless we apply the term to making provision for the future and paying one's debts. Not a bad thing in this way. No one can go very far, however, without ideals of some kind. But it's not for the writer here to lay down to the student of mental discipline, will culture, and scientific concentration what these should be. Everyone must form his own. It's almost certain when he was dipped into the new psychology a little, he will be fired by the same enthusiasm, the same keenness to progress, to widen his outlook, to aim higher, to cultivate ambitions that he dares scarcely have whispered to himself a short time before. It's a rule. In fact, it's a rule for those coming in touch with mental discipline and will culture to have kindled within them what almost amounts to a new sense, a desire to express themselves along new lines. It's as though they had suddenly discovered a new sensation, or unexpectedly come upon a country whose existence they had never even imagined before. What frequently happens in these instances is that the interior depths of the mind have been touched, and they give rise to vibrations that shake the whole of the mental vehicles and initiate changes that lead to an almost new life. To find out what your strong points are, go back to your childhood and see in what direction your tastes lie. It may require a few moments daily to get the retrospective habit working smoothly for you, but it can be got to work in this direction. And each day will find recollection of one's early days more vividly. It has often been remarked by people that they can remember trivial incidents that occurred 20 or 30 years ago, whilst they have difficulty in recalling matters that are really of importance and they only took place a couple days ago. One reason for this is that in childhood, impressions, being naturally fewer, were deeper. When the tastes of early life have been rediscovered, the student may see if they still lie in that direction. And if so, he can set to work by constructive thinking and get the new vibrations to work. The mind is always churning something over. Hence, if allowed to go its own way, it invariably thinks injurious and useless thoughts. And from these we get tendencies, many of them of a negative character. And from this we see the creation of destructive forces. It's just as easy to turn these forces to constructive work as it is the reverse. To get the whole power of the mind, it is necessary to get rid of the idea that the mind must work along the lines that it has already been working. Because by thinking of the mind in this fashion, we just limit the possibilities. If you were exploring a strange country, and instead of going into the interior, you contented yourself by sitting down on the shore and looking around, surmising that the interior is not much different from this here, from the exterior. Well, then you'd be limiting your knowledge of that country. It would only be by actively traversing the domain that you would gain a knowledge of the region, really. So, in the reason of the mind's mental domain, if you wish to work with the whole force of the faculties, powers, and tools of the mind, they must all be brought under way. The mind being a creature of habit, and, as just said, perpetually churning thought as the cow chews the cud, it must have something on which to operate. If we become enthusiastic over the work at hand, as we rationally ought to do, we shall find no obstacles to the employment of all of its powers in the art of will culture and mind training as taught further on here in this work. The mind can never do its best, however, so long as there is any underlying current of dissatisfaction, any factor which can in any way vitiate it. There must be perfect tranquility, for one thing. Well, then there must be an intense and deep desire to gain the end in view, whatever it be. In this way do we obtain the cooperation of the various forces of the mind, which, while being one, is composed of various parts. The interest of each aspect of the mechanism of consciousness is enlisted, and where the interest of all is concerned, it all move in one direction. This means harmony. And all harmonious movement is easy and rhythmical. There is no strain. One force does not move in opposition to another, and as a general result, willpower is generated. The whole of the force of the mind is engaged, and there can consequently be only one direction in which it can move forward. This is a psychological moment in which to practice concentration and will culture. An idea given to the mind in such a condition will be gripped as by an octopus. It will be absorbed. By one of the laws of the new psychology, a thought placed in front of the consciousness, so to speak, is photographed upon it. It is carried automatically to the subconscious. And by another law, whatever once enters the realm of the subconscious, be it strong or weak, positive or negative, good or bad, is beyond the control of even the will. The conception or the thought must work out in the external life. It cannot lie forgotten in some dark recesses of the human mind, but it takes its turn and affects the normal mind. Here's the secret of moods. People regarded as level-headed and sane do things which astonish those who know them best. During some unguarded moment, they have given way to some impulse and entertained an inimical thought, which they have fructified unwillingly with will, desire, and concentration, and the result has been appalling. Remorse for these lapses brought out by ignorance of the laws of the mind only too realistically brings home the danger. The bearing of these laws in one's affairs of life is to make the reader more careful with respect to what thoughts he entertains. Knowing something of the apparatus of the mind, you will be careful to avoid admitting conceptions that are destructive. The mind at times seems filled with activity, and at such moments he will convert such conceptions into constructive ideas. He will know that if he wants inspiration to do a certain piece of work, now is the time to take the opportunity. Shutting out everything but the idea on which he is intent, he will close all the senses, wherever he is, hold down the mind of the one theme with which he is dealing, and it will fill the channel thus prepared. The practicality of concentration and will culture in daily life will be obvious. Every human being, however humble the niche he may fill in the great social scheme, has some duty or service to perform. And only as it is perfectly fulfilled does he honestly discharge it. But it does not end with this perfect fulfillment. The performing of an action perfectly creates the ability to do more. The faculties concerned by their more perfect functioning place all their elements in a position which will emit more force, make them more capable of carrying out their natural functions, and energize the cells of these mental atoms, if the term may be permitted. So that there is an inrush of the great life wave which pulses throughout nature and ever seeks to ensoul whatever receptacles or channels may be provided for the purpose. It cannot be too widely known that nature has an inexhaustible amount of what for a better expression we might designate raw material, which she wants to be worked up. And that man is one of the channels by which this can best be accomplished. The universal urge, called by other writers a surge, which is incessant, which is ever seeking expression, because to become is the keyboard of all manifestation, prowls about, seeking admission through the doors man can open if he likes, and by obtaining that admission, its purpose is achieved, for the forces in the faculties will then meet, raise, or transmute the original impulse. Chapter 10, Lesson 9, Metaphysical Alchemy. That's for the next video, so I'll see you there. L.W. De Laurence, the Master Key.